Hades was not Greek Satan, but the god of a world everyone eventually entered. Governed by boundaries, memory, ritual, and law. The Greeks imagined death less as fire, and more as crossing. Shadow, memory, and law. Rivers, judges, coins, tomb gifts, and burial customs all point toward a mapped passage rather than a torture pit. That difference matters because modern retellings often turn Hades into a villain too quickly. In early Greek poetry, Hades is frightening because he is permanent, not because he tempts souls. His name could mean the god, the place, and the invisible condition of the dead. Which is why one word can move between poetry, ritual speech, and ordinary fear. The first proof is language. People avoided speaking his name too casually. And euphemisms like Platon show how respect, dread, and buried wealth became tangled together. They called him Platon, the wealthy one, because everything buried belonged below. So Hades is not only death. He is also soil, buried treasure, and hidden abundance. That is why his story cannot be separated from Persephone and Demeter. The famous abduction is not a romance in the ancient hymn. It begins as a rupture. Persephone is taken from a meadow, and Demeter's grief stops the earth from feeding humans. The myth explains more than marriage. It explains why life depends on negotiated return. Zeus permits the arrangement. Hades enforces it, and Demeter refuses to accept silence. The pomegranate seed becomes the smallest object with the largest consequence. Because she tastes the underworld. Persephone must divide her life between below and above. This makes Hades a household problem. Not just a monster in a cave. Every family knew the underworld would eventually claim someone they loved. Burial mattered because the dead needed passage, memory, and proper separation from the living. Coins for Charon are a later and uneven practice. But the idea is powerful. Charon, the ferryman, turns death into a crossing rather than a sudden disappearance. The Styx is not just scenery. It is an oath river feared even by gods. Other rivers added moods. Forgetting, fire, lament, and grief around the same realm. Cerberus guards the threshold, making the border more important than the beast itself. A gate, a river, a guard, and a judge make Hades feel like a legal system. That legal feeling appears in later traditions of Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus judging souls. But the earliest Homeric underworld is often less moral courtroom than shadowy survival. In the Odyssey, the dead speak only after blood gives them a temporary voice. Achilles tells Odysseus that even heroic fame cannot make death attractive. That is one of the oldest shocks in Greek afterlife imagination. The underworld also contains punishments. But they are special cases. Not everyone's fate. Sisyphus pushing the stone became famous. Because endless labor is instantly understandable. Tantalus stands near food and water he can never reach. These stories are not proof that all Greeks imagined hell for ordinary people. They show that myth used the underworld to think about justice, taboo, and limits. Hades himself rarely storms into stories. His power is quiet and immovable. He does not usually seduce, trick, or wander like other Olympian gods. That scarcity makes him feel darker. Because he appears when the story cannot avoid death. Greek artists still pictured him bearded, enthroned, holding a scepter or cornucopia. The cornucopia matters because Platon is tied to wealth rising from below. Persephone beside him changes the throne from a prison image into a seasonal mystery. Some sanctuaries treated underworld gods with chthonic rituals, facing downward into earth. Offerings could be poured into pits, because the receiving power lived beneath. This was not fantasy for worshippers. It was a practical way to address dangerous powers. Eleusis made the Demeter and Persephone story one of the most important sacred traditions in Greece. The mysteries are difficult, because initiates kept parts of the ritual secret. Still, ancient witnesses suggest initiation offered hope about death and blessedness. That hope does not erase Hades. It makes his realm emotionally negotiable. Another gate into Hades appears in hero stories where living people go below and return. Heracles drags Cerberus up, proving strength can cross the border temporarily. Orpheus enters with music, proving grief can become art powerful enough to move the dead. But Orpheus fails when he looks back, because the underworld punishes broken conditions. These returns are dramatic, because ordinary people do not get them. Hades is powerful because almost every story bends around his border. Even gods cannot simply ignore the rules once underworld food or oaths are involved. That gives Greek myth a hard lesson. Power has limits, even among immortals. The Romans later identified Hades with Pluto, carrying the wealth name into Latin tradition. Roman poets made the underworld more elaborate, adding their own moral and imperial concerns. Christian Europe later read these images through hell, judgment, demons, and salvation. That is why modern versions often inherit a layered image, not a purely Greek one. To understand Hades, we have to peel those layers back without pretending one layer is fake. The Greek Hades was not comforting, but it was not simple evil either. He represented the fact that death is orderly, universal, and impossible to bribe forever. The underworld also preserved social memory. Names, graves, rites, and stories kept the dead present. Without ritual memory, the dead risked becoming only shadows. That makes Hades less like a monster and more like the architecture of human fear. Rivers carry fear, gates carry rules. Judges carry anxiety, and Persephone carries return. The popular version often asks who Hades loved. But the older question is deeper. How did Greeks imagine a world where death belonged inside cosmic order? That question touches farmers, mourners, kings, poets, initiates, and anyone afraid of being forgotten. The underworld was where seeds vanished before returning as grain. It was where beloved voices became distant unless memory called them back. It was the place heroes finally learned that glory has a limit. It may have promised that death was not only darkness. Hades was a warning that even power ends at the same gate. This is the real reason Hades survives. He is not a character alone, but a system. The system begins with fear, but it also asks how humans live with unavoidable loss. The evidence is scattered, because Hades belongs to poems, rituals, objects, and later imagination. A vase may show the god enthroned, while a hymn makes a mother search for her daughter. A grave may show family memory, while epic poetry imagines heroes speaking from shadow. That is why a responsible Hades story must keep categories visible. Some claims are literary tradition. We know them because poets shaped them. Some claims are archaeological inference. Burials and images show practices, not private belief perfectly. Some claims are later reception. Rome, Christianity, and modern films changed the emotional costume. When those categories blur, Hades becomes either cartoon villain or secret romance. When they stay separate, the older story becomes stranger and more useful. Hades teaches that cultures do not only imagine death. They organize it. They give grief a route, memory an object, fear a name, and return a season. So the darkest Greek god may reveal one of the most human inventions. Meaning below the ground. So the final contradiction is simple. Hades looks dark because he holds what life depends on. Watch the Folklore Atlas episode for the full map of rivers, queens, heroes, rituals, and evidence. A final piece of evidence comes from Orpheus, the singer who goes below. Because love cannot accept a locked door. His story does not make Hades romantic. It shows how absolute the boundary remains even when music softens it. Mystery cults add another layer. Some Greeks hoped death could be prepared for, not simply feared. Small gold tablets, ritual phrases, and sacred stories offered instructions for a soul in the dark. Showing that some communities imagined death as a journey with rules that could be learned. But those objects do not describe every Greek household. They show that belief varied by place, ritual, and community. That variety is why Hades is hard to understand honestly. One tradition cannot hold epic shadow. Family grief, civic burial. Local ritual, mystery hope. And later moral imagination without losing the texture of the evidence. The evidence asks for a slower answer. Hades was a map of limits, not a single personality trait. And that may be why the underworld still feels alive. It gives shape to the one journey no culture can ignore. Watch the Folklore Atlas episode to follow the evidence across poetry, burial practice, mystery cults, vase images, and the ancient fear of crossing a boundary alone.